So this first module is the dynamofs module. Um, Basically implements a FS, like a Node FS interface that can be used by the isomorphic bridge. Um, Here's kind of the main piece of it. This promises object with the FS functions on it. Um, and it's created by calling this function dynamofs, and there's this set of options you can pass in. Most of them are defaults, except for namespace. That's basically separating the different file systems from each other using that namespace option. Let's see, the other thing, we add this clear function, and it's just essentially makes it easier to wipe out a file system, because otherwise you have to use, let's see, our remove directory, and there are issues with doing that. Cursive. Anyway, it's just simpler to have a clear function rather than go through this interface. Okay, so just going to point out a few things here. This was kind of the first thing I did when I was working on the proof of concept, to sort of prove out that we could use a Dynamo-backed file system. One thing that has changed, and I'll talk into more detail about this, is that we're using S3 as sort of an overflow from Dynamo, because we can only store entries of up to 400 kilobytes. And this storage threshold, which we are setting on the file system, determines like where the cutoff basically is for size. Right now I've got it set to 350 KB just to be conservative. So yeah, we are implementing all of these functions, and in terms of how much we're implementing of the actual Node FS, there's still some things that are not there, like there's a recursive flag on make directory, and we're assuming that's true always instead of allowing the caller to use it. So just because it simplifies things, and we don't really have a case where isomorphic is going to call it without it being recursive. So there's things like that where it doesn't really have all of the capability of the FS module. There's also cases where I essentially copied code from Node's FS implementation, and we're not really using everything there, so that probably could use some cleanup at some point. And this is sort of an example of that. So we've had this get validated path that's used in make directory, because you can, I guess, in the Node FS, if you can pass in a string or a buffer, and so you go into here and you want to determine whether it's a URL or not. In our case, it's never going to be a URL, so we can actually simplify this. And then I think there's some stuff in here where it checks to see if the buffer is null or has the null character in it. Anyway, there's this null check function. This all came straight out of the Node FS library. And it was basically just to get things working before I had a better handle on things. So I haven't gone back up to clean that up. It definitely needs to be simplified because we don't really need all that. Oh yeah, here's the basically the stat record that gets written to Dynamo. There's create time, modification time, file mode, size, these bits that you have in the file system stat thing. So we have all that. We also have, you can do symlinks. It supports symlinks using this target property. I don't know that we need symlinks, but it is supported. Let's see what else to call out. So we're using this execute with retry mainly because if you get into a situation where the Dynamo table hasn't scaled up to capacity, you're going to get this provision throughput exceeded exception. And so if you call a Dynamo function with this execute with retry, it's going to basically do an exponential back off on the request until it eventually succeeds or it times out in terms of number of requests. So you pass in how many attempts you want, and it will keep trying, doubling the delay, starting at 1 second. I think that's what that is, or maybe it's 1 millisecond. I can't remember now. Delay, yeah. So it looks like 1/10 of a second is what it does in terms of the initial delay, and then doubles it from there. Let's see. Okay, that's that. Let me go to the storage thing. Okay, so this is read file. Actually, let's look at write file first. Write file. All right, so here's the check. If we're over that storage threshold, creates an S3 key for that item, writes the data to that key in S3, and then if the key is set, then it's going to store the key. Otherwise, it'll store the content. And then in the read file, it's just going to do check for the presence of that key. If the key is there, it reads the item from S3. Yeah, so this is where obviously the bulk of the new code is. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out or leave comments on the ticket.